All right, guys. Today I've got a very special guest. I've only discovered him, if I can put it that way, recently. Somebody tweeted him to me. I decided to go and check out his YouTube clips, and I thought this is a very interesting guy to chat with. Hazem Farraj, how you doing, sir?
I'm well. كيف الحال خيي؟
ماشي الحال ماشي الحال تشرفنا. Uh,
حبيبي.
before we start, I need to make sure of something. I did this, by the way, with Faisal Saad al-Mutar, who's a Iraqi activist who was on my show.
Mhm.
And in his case, I had sang a song in Arabic, and I wanted to do the same thing with you to make sure that you are a
True Arab.
true Arab. Okay, so رح بغني غنية ولازم تحذر مين عم بغنيها، إذا لا يعني أنت جاسوس.
Okay.
حاضر؟
حاضر تفضل.
اوكي. حبيتك بالصيف وحبيتك بالشتاء، نطرتك بالصيف ونطرتك بالشتاء. Who is this?
Okay, I have a couple guesses.
Go.
Is it Kulthum or Fairuz?
The second one. You are not a spy.
Yes. So now
Fairuz.
I am qualified to give an opinion, right?
You have been authenticated as a non-spy.
I've been verified as a true Palestinian non-spy.
Very good. I actually, with Faisal, I used also a Fairuz song, a different one. Of course, I choose Fairuz number one because she's probably the most famous Lebanese singer, and she was the singer that was very important in my childhood growing up in Lebanon. This is when she was really, truly most famous, and so I have a very close affinity with her music.
Oh my gosh, those old guys like Fairuz, Abdul Halim Hafid, Kulthum. Oh God, they don't make music like that anymore.
And in the case of Kulthum, I mean, she would go on for 5 hours.
Yes. My bad.
That's okay. And she does all these sort of Arabic lamentations, right? And then everybody in the audience goes, oof, oof, like as if they're getting intoxicated by her lamentations. Very interesting. If any of you, even if you're not Arabic, are interested in seeing a different musical genre, definitely check her out. So I thought maybe we'd start Hazem today by beginning with sort of your upbringing, your background, because of course that trajectory is a very interesting one. So maybe you could tell us about where you were born, what your background is, what you then changed to, and so on. Give us a bit of a context.
Okay, absolutely. So I was born in 1984 in Brooklyn, New York. At the age of 12, my father moved the whole family back to Jerusalem because that's where we're from ethnically. We're Palestinians. So I grew up Islamic, and even the Arabic culture is a Semitic culture, so it's very much like the Hebrew culture, which means your DNA is who you are, not your citizenship or the externals, right? That's why Israel could be dispersed throughout the world and then after 2,000 years become a nation. It's because we hold on to our culture. So I wasn't really it wasn't a culture shock for me to go to the Middle East as a 12-year-old Arab American. What happened for me was when I actually began to really make demands on my spirituality. And what does that mean? You see, there are things that money cannot buy. There are things that culture cannot give you. There are things that family tradition cannot fulfill and satisfy. And so I started to do what I call the spiritual checklist. I had been doing it in America because remember, we're Semites. That's what we do. We keep our culture. But for me, I think when I went back to Jerusalem, it was me expecting for my religion and my spirituality to be manifested in a beautiful way. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. In fact, you see, I had a broken childhood. My parents separated when I was 5. That's the clean version. Just grew up with just a really broken situation. So at 12, 13, 14, 15, I'm really seeking healing within the narrative of Islam. And I got worse, actually. I got more depressed. I got more vulnerable.
Because you studied the contents of the religion. You would read the Qur'an, you'd read the Hadith. Is that how you discovered the things that you ultimately discovered? Or is it just by going to the mosque? Or how was that process?
Just traditionally going to the mosque, doing my daily Islamic course, learning the contents. However, I began to really understand Islam the older I got. So for example, so what does a 12, 13, 15-year-old kid know about religion? Really, with all due respect to the 15-year-olds, nothing, right? So, but for me, what happened was I was seeking all of those things that God is supposed to give to you: peace to sleep at night, calm in your soul. You're anchored on the inside. Your problems, you may have problems, but your problems don't have you, that kind of thing. And so it just didn't work out that way. In fact, I got worse, and what I call a crisis of religion happened. And it was a 3-year process from beginning to end. And oof, it was not easy. It was not easy. So my exodus out of Islam happened really twofold. One is I was making demands on Islam and it was not delivering. Two, I began to learn about the truth within Islam. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Why are the Christians and the Jews really? Why does God not like the Jews? Why does
the
God
Jews
not?
are the worst enemies of Allah, right?
It's true. It's
Yes.
in the Quran. It's in the trilogy.
Yeah.
It's in the three sources. But so for me, by the way, Gab, imagine being a Palestinian in the middle of a crisis of religion, in the middle of the second Intifada happening.
I mean, you're in the trenches.
Oh,
You're right there.
It was a disaster. There's a song in Christianity is called Happy Day When Jesus Came to Me. I don't sing that song because I became a Christian against my own will, actually.
Now, you converted in Jerusalem or after you returned to the US?
No, I converted in Jerusalem. I converted underground. I couldn't tell a single person. And then 9 months later, it got so bad we had to come to America.
Because the apostasy punishment in Islam is...
Oh, tea and biscuits, man. It's great.
So it must be a misinterpretation or a mistranslation from Arabic when you're supposed to be killed if you're an apostate, right? It really means just invite somebody for tea, right?
Gad, I'll tell you honestly, there is no, unless either this thing that's happening in the West, it's either misinformation or a flat out deceiving of everybody. I don't know how one code of anti-Western values can become so popular in the West.
Well, I tackle that in a lot of my videos.
I know. By the way, you are a genius.
Well,
I literally sit there watching your videos.
Thank you.
Thinking,
You're very kind.
Oh my God, this guy gets it. I love it.
Shukran, ya hello, shukran. Okay, so then you convert to Christianity. You don't share this with your family, I assume,
Oh,
right?
no, I knew better than to do that.
Okay.
I knew better than to do, because our culture is a tribal, shame-based culture, or the opposite of shame is honor.
Yes.
Honor-based culture. So I knew there were two things that I don't ever want to mess with: our women and our religion.
Right.
Because if you mess with our women, we will kill you. If you mess with our religion, we will kill you.
Right.
That's just how it is everywhere outside of America and Europe. And so I knew not to say anything. So I was a secret ex-Muslim for years, 5 years actually.
While living in Jerusalem.
No, well, it began in Jerusalem.
And then you came back.
We came back to America. I graduated high school, and at 17, I left home in the name of college because I was too afraid to tell my father I'm an ex-Muslim. And then on top of that, to say that I'm a Christian was even worse. So it's like adding insult to injury,
So would it, in the eyes of your dad, and then we could talk about in the eyes of the religion, would it have been worse for you to convert to Christianity or Judaism, which is still Ahl al-Kutub, the people of the book, or would it have been better for you to become a non-believer in any of the monotheistic religions? I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but why don't you tell us?
I know my family, my story is that I've had them say, I wish you would have committed murder. I wish you would have become a druggie. I wish you would have been, we'd love you if you were living on the streets selling crack cocaine, but just don't become a Christian.
Right. And of course, Jew is completely off the table. That's not even conceivable. That's not within the realm of possibilities.
That one is, oh my head hurts thinking about that. So I'll leave that one to you.
Right.
So you understand, not only was my religion a part of my spirituality, but it was also part of my national identity as Palestinians. I mean, And that's another thing. We would go to the mosque many Fridays. We'd go to the mosque, and it was nothing more than a pep rally. It was nothing more than an anti-Israel pep rally. Fight the Jews, jihad this, jihad that.
Let me sing you a song and I'll ask you to finish it for me.
Oh, I know it.
Khaybar, Khaybar, ya Yahud, Jaish Muhammad. Finish it for us.
Sayaud.
Very nice. Could you please translate this for our non-Arabic speakers and tell us how it really refers to love and pluralism towards the Jews?
Yeah, you see, in about 1400 years ago, Muhammad was very loving towards the Jews, and there was an event called the Battle of Khaybar, where he just literally destroyed the Jews. And it's the Muslims reminding the Jews, Khaybar, Khaybar, oh, you Jews, the army of Muhammad will return, Sayaud. So you can imagine how leaving Islam for me was really a traumatic. Honestly, it was the worst thing I've ever done in my life, and yet it was the best thing I've ever done in my life, because I couldn't be me today without having gone through that. And what I found, Gad, is that the Middle East is not. Humans are humans, whether you're in America or the Middle East. The problem is the peer pressure and the tribal culture prohibits people like me and you to speak up. But thank God, by the way, we're talking about not, being an underground ex-Muslim. I was, for years, I thought I was the only ex-Muslim. I literally, as absurd as that sounds, thought for years that I was the only one. I thought, oh my God, when I get to heaven, God's gonna throw me in hellfire, because how dare you, of all the earth? It sounds really silly, but it's the truth. It's how I felt, and it's because it's such a taboo subject.
Now, are you familiar with the group which is actually based out of the U.S. called Ex-Muslims of America?
Yes, I am.
Because I think she was my first guest, Sarah Haider. I don't know if you know who she is. So you do. Oh, right. So she was a guest on my show, and she's an ex-Muslim. But her path is slightly different from yours. And here I'll ask you to compare, in that she went from Islam to non-belief, whereas you went from one monotheistic religion to another. So not necessarily as relating to you or her, do you think for people who might leave a religion, whether in this case leave Islam, do you think it's an easier step to take to replace one set of religious beliefs with another, or is probably the better way to go to just drop all of this sort of Bronze Age narrative?
That's a really, really good question. I can tell you my own personal situation, because that's where I have authority to speak. For me, I needed to replace it with something. I needed the opposite of hatred. I needed the opposite of war. I needed the opposite of jihad. I needed the opposite. We're Middle Easterners. We're spiritual by nature. It's very hard. It's very hard to see what's happening in the Middle East and know the culture behind it. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not easy, and I fully understand the trauma that happens when someone leaves Islam. What I tell my friends all the time is, don't be a hero. Disbelieve in Islam in your heart. You don't have to be like some campaigning person who's going to go and deliver the world from religion. I personally, I think my Christian religion has enhanced my life for the better. It provided for me personally, the solution. It provided the healing that I needed to survive, and not just survive, but to actually to do well. Because I say it all the time. If I was not, honestly, God, there were times where I was so depressed, I'd sleep 18, 19, 20 hours a day. That person could have gone to drugs. Hazem in the bed, depressed, could have gone to all of these other vices, but I went to Jesus, and I'm happy about that. However, I do encourage the Muslim community. I don't try to convert anybody. For me, it's a personal thing. If I go to a church and speak, then obviously that's why I'm there. However, one-on-one and it's not my main motivation. My authority in speaking about Islam is not to convert people, it's to reveal the truth within Islam.
Right.
Right?
Well, actually, that's a good point, because the reason why I wanted to bring up the fact that you converted is
Yeah.
because it becomes easy for some people to sort of denigrate the source of the message, you in this case, because then they could see that you are religiously motivated. Through your trajectory from one religion to the other, you're now, quote, motivated to denigrate your former religion because you've now found a new truth. And the reality is, and I think it's important to make this point, that the things that you say in your new series on YouTube, where you sort of dismantle many of these issues that we're facing, is ISIS Islamic or not? Those things hold, they're either true or not, independently whether Hazem is a believer or not, whether he's Christian or not. So maybe that's where we could turn to now. So tell us briefly about what was the reason, the trigger that set you on this path to create these YouTube clips. Tell us a bit about them and what you're hoping to achieve with them.
So I don't know if you know my history yet, but I when I gave myself to Christianity, I gave my whole being to it. And when I left home in order to be to have the freedom to be what I want to be, an ex-Muslim. If I want to follow Jesus, I have the right to follow Jesus. If I want to worship a rock, I have the right to worship a rock. I just don't have the right to hit anyone with my rock, right? Excuse the pun, by the way.
I get it.
But it's my right, and no one can take that from me.
حرية التفكير.
حرية التفكير، حرية الدين، حرية العقيدة. It's like
freedom of expression, just to translate, freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. By the way, oh God, there's so many things I'm trying to like. It's a. If I go on rabbit trails, correct me, okay?
No worries. Keep going.
Okay. So I did Christian ministry for so long.
You were a televangelist, right?
Yes, I became, not only was I was good at it too. I felt like the solution for the Middle East craziness is the world needs Jesus, okay? I don't ascribe to that completely yet, or as of now. I believe that there are different areas of influence that many people have to involve themselves with in order to produce change. So the TV preaching is great. It's good. It's what I would rather do than go there to preach. I'd rather be on TV telling someone about my religion rather than get killed on the corner of, Jerusalem or wherever. So for me, I did that, and so for the most part, the Christians were listening, but the world outside of the Christian church was not. In fact, the West was making more excuses for Islam than they were for what Islam stands for. And that's when I realized, I'll tell you the defining factor for me, which made me go from doing Christian-esque things and messages and writing to Islamic truth, Islamic reality checks and stuff like that. There was whenever all the craziness happened in Egypt a few years ago, there was a picture of a man, he was burning a Bible. And the riot police were around him, and it was just so nonchalant. And it was during the time, if I'm not mistaken, where the dude in Florida was going to burn a Qur'an.
Oh, the pastor, right, yes.
Yeah. So it became like such a big deal here in America. And then over there, it was just so completely normal for this guy to wave a burning Bible in the public, and the police were there. So I literally, on my Facebook, I just said, if I would tell this guy one thing today, it's simply this: burn the pages, burn the books, burn the knowledge, burn the freedoms, create your laws, do all of these things just to stop the free thinking of your people, but it will never end. You can do it forever, but resilient human beings will always be resilient. Man, you would think that I cursed Muhammad.
Right. Which itself should be something that is allowed in a free society, right?
Oh,
I mean, the way you say it as though that's sort of the benchmark of what we can't do. But of course, if we
can you see the psychology of someone who's grown up in a very so you're right, as if that's the ultimate blasphemy. Right. You know what I mean? However, but the backlash wasn't just coming from the Muslim community; it was coming from the American white folks
who were saying you're a bigot, you're Islamophobic.
You're a bigot. Stop picking fights. Right. You've heard it. I'm sure.
Yeah, of course.
And that's when I thought, you know what? I can't. Especially Daesh, ISIS started their thing, and the news and all of this. It was just a big conversation. Everyone was contributing to it except me. It felt like. So that was my way of saying, you know what? Let's clear the fog of the political correctness of Obama and Hillary and even Bush and all of these politicians and
all Western politicians, right? I mean, every single one to the last one.
Oh my God! It's honestly, God, it's not funny anymore.
So,
it's really out of control.
And so, in your case, what you did, and I watched your series so far, and I'll put the descriptor for people to go check it out. After I post the clip. I mean, you actually argue something that I've argued, and for example, I had a guest, Dr. Bill Warner, who also applies the same approach, which is basically, look, if you want to understand what a religion proposes, what the edicts of a religion are, you need to go to the original sources. If I want to know whether Judaism allows the consumption of pork or not, I don't look at my friend Mordechai to see whether he eats pork or not, because he may be a Jew who decides to violate that edict, right? I need to go to the sources to see whether that is part of the kashrut laws, the kosher laws, or not. And so in your case, what you're basically saying, well, look, we don't need to mystify this whole process. We don't need to listen to what politicians tell us. We simply need to go to these sources, three sources basically. We've got the Qur'an, we've got the hadith, the sayings and deeds of Muhammad, and we've got the seerah, the biography of Muhammad. Those are all clear historical records that we can study to tell us whether a particular statement is true or not. So maybe you could tell us how you use that, for example, to dismantle the idea whether what ISIS is doing is Islamic or not, because I know you did a whole clip on that. So maybe walk us through that process.
Well, just like really what you just said, the only way to know what Hazem thinks is to what? Ask Hazem.
Exactly.
Right? I don't want Gad. I mean, I'm sure you'd be honorable and integrous in it, but I don't want you speaking on my behalf. Because you have your opinion, it's not necessarily mine, right? So the easiest, least mystical, the most academic, the most logical way to do it is to just ask Hazem. Well, if you're discussing Islam, who are you going to ask? You're going to ask President Obama or Ben Affleck or Bill Maher? You know what I mean? Don't even ask Hazem about Islam, because I don't have the authority to speak to override the Sunnah being the ultimate supreme example of Muhammad, the darling of Islam. So for me I just went to the sources, because if I was a lawyer and I went to court and I went to the judge and I said, Your Honor, this is the situation. However, Belgium is the economy in Belgium is screwed up, whatever. I'm just making up some far-fetched thing. The judge will look at me like I'm stupid and I need to go back to law school.
Right.
When you're a theologian, you have to treat the evidence as evidence. The source text is your evidence. You veer from that, then you have just stepped out of bounds, and then you're no longer credible to speak or conclude any opinion. So
let me use some of the arguments that the apologists will use. I call it the infinite regress of delegitimization. So you usually start by asking somebody a question. For example, are you from the Middle East? If the person says no, then you're not allowed to talk about the Quran. If you say yes, as you are, as I am, then we go to the next question. But do you speak Arabic? Yes. Is it your mother tongue? Yes. And then we keep going until I get to a question that you will fail on, and then that serves as the means by which your view is no longer legitimate. So in your case, you speak perfect Arabic, you know how to read all of those sources, there is no way that you could misunderstand it, but you didn't go to Jami'at al-Azhar, right? You didn't go to Al-Azhar University in Egypt, where there is the foundational Sunni Islamic jurisprudence. Therefore, you're not a theologian. So why should we listen to you, Hazem, when you tell us what's in the Quran? What would you say to guys who tell you this?
You know what? I would be thrilled if someone mentioned Al-Azhar University to me in a debate or in a discussion, because all I have to do is literally quote Al-Azhar University. You'll see that they are no different than ISIS in Iraq and Syria or the Saudis in Saudi Arabia. There's been two main propagandists in the Middle East which has led to where we're at now. Number one is Al-Azhar University. Okay. Number two is Mecca, Saudiya. These two guys spend more money on propaganda and more money on the advancement of Islam in the West. It's uncanny. It's ridiculous. The money, the oil money that they're pouring into influencing the Western culture to be pro-Islam and lovey-dovey and kumbaya, it's really ridiculous. So I'm kind of thrilled that ISIS is promising to set Saudi Arabia straight, because Saudi Arabia contributed for years with their propaganda machine. And there, you see, Saudi Arabia thought, oh yeah, we are the caliphate. So when the caliph comes, he's going to be one of us. We'll rule the Muslim world. Well, they've grew this monster into what we have now, ISIS. And ISIS now says we're going to destroy Saudi Arabia. So Al-Azhar University, Saudi Arabia, all these big theologians who are actual voices on Islam, they don't hide what me and you are trying to say.
Exactly.
They tell us.
You just have to listen to them.
You just have to listen to them. Their preachers preach it on Friday. Their satellites. I went to Lebanon about not long ago. It was Friday. I flip on the TV just to kind of like engage the culture and do all that. And the dude was in there in the mosque praying his Friday prayer, Allahumma ansurna ala al-qawm al-kafirun. Like even the minute that I picked up the remote, turned it on, even on TV, he was praying curses against the Jews and the Christians and the infidels.
Exactly.
Like they don't hide it. Why are we hiding it?
Well,
you know
because now we apply the no true Scotsman's fallacy, where basically any person that you provide as proof of some of the problematic passages in Islamic texts, that person who is espousing them is not a true Muslim. So Yusuf al-Qaradawi, arguably the top Islamic cleric in the world, certainly
hero of Sunni Islam.
Certainly of Sunni Islam. Well, he's a fake Muslim. He doesn't know Islam. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the Khalif,
he's a terrorist.
He's not a true Muslim. He doesn't understand Islam, despite the fact that he has a PhD in Sharia, in Islamic law from the Middle East. He doesn't understand. He's a fake Muslim. But your friend Ahmad, who goes to Penn State with you, who drinks alcohol and is very liberal and secular, he is the one who is practicing true Islam.
Right.
How do we get around this cognitive bias? How do we get people... And of course, I hate to have to do this preface. We're not talking about individual Muslims who, most of them are lovely and no different than you and I. We're talking about the doctrines within the religion. We are criticizing ideas.
We're criticizing ideas, not people.
Exactly. So how do we get people to actually break free of this pervasive cognitive bias, where every time you point to, by definition, someone who is profoundly an expert in Islam, then you just blow them away by saying, but they're not a true Muslim? How do we get around that?
I think you just keep doing what you're doing. You tell the truth. Eventually, listen, Gad, there was a reason why for years I thought I was the only ex-Muslim. And I've heard other ex-Muslims say the same. It's almost like textbook identical. Ex-Muslims all over the world have experienced the same thing. Now, 15 years ago, I was scared to the core of my being to say anything. Today, I'm thrilled and I'm proud, because for the first time in my life, and I'm only 31, but for the first time in my life,
ولد
صغير, right?
صغير.
The first time in my life that I actually see it's okay to say publicly I am an ex-Muslim.
Right. Now, do you feel comfortable today to go back anywhere in the Middle East because you think maybe that people won't know who you are? Or are you sufficiently afraid that it is such an ominous thing if someone were to discover this about you, that you've sort of basically ruled out any Middle Eastern visits in the foreseeable future?
You know what? That is a very good question. And there was about maybe 9 years of my last 15 years of being an ex-Muslim. That's what I used to think. Okay. There were actually 3 times I thought I was going to get killed. 3 times. The first time is when I left home, the very first time. By the way, I was a minor. My father could have easily taken me back to Jerusalem. That's number 1. Number 2 is when I went on television. And because here's what happened, Gad, when I left home, and then The conflict happened and it was official. Okay, you are now disowned. What they did, what my family did, they told everyone I was on drugs.
Right.
They told everyone I was at college, losing my way, right?
Because only if you are on drugs could you walk away from the true religion, right? No sane person would make that choice, and therefore you have to pathologize your decision, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, listen, there's been scandals happen in amongst our people that are so scandalous, like really jail time scandalous, and they're great. They were earning a living. They
Right.
were they were surviving. But you, Hazem, who tries to help people because of your ex-Muslim thing, you believe in spirituality, you believe in freedom, you are disowned.
Shaitan.
Shaitan unos, مش بس shaitan.
You
It's
are.
like,
Let me translate this for people. It's too enjoyable to have. I wish we could have this whole conversation in Arabic, but shaitan, I'm basically as Hazem is saying things, I'm throwing things at him in Arabic. That means like he's the devil, which is kind of only a demonic soul could do what he's done. That's called the shaitan. So yeah. Go ahead.
And the double standard is horrible because like I said, I have cousins who are scandalous. They are welcome. They are a part of the family. They're loved. Blah 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 blah. Yet because of me leaving Islam, then forever I'm disowned.
So you haven't renewed your ties with anybody in your family? Is it everybody whom you've ever known in your family has disowned you, or are there some people that have broken free from that rule and you've maintained contact with them, or are you pretty much an orphan on your own from a family?
You know what? I am. It depends. Okay, so over the last 15 years, I've made 5 attempts to reconcile with my family. Each time it's been unsuccessful. I just met my mother about 9 years ago, and so we have an awkward relationship. So I speak to my biological mother, but I grew up with a stepmom.
Okay.
So from my immediate family, I continuously talk to my mom. However, the question is, I don't doubt that my father loves me. I don't doubt that my family loves me. And this is probably you're gonna love this display of psychological. You're probably reading me right now. What I'm about to say is complete trauma, but nonetheless, it's how I feel. I know they love me because they haven't tried to kill me.
Right. Wow. What a charitable position. That should be on a T-shirt.
Isn't that so?
I know I'm loved, for I have not been stoned to death.
Do I sound like an orphan? I swear, I don't mean it that way. I mean like they are more human than their beliefs because, listen, 3 times I thought I was going to get killed. I survived it. So back to your question about am I afraid to go back to the Middle East? No, I have had some, I won't say serious moments because I'm alive, I'm well. I have the freedom to leave and come and go and whatnot. But I have been told, are you going to be here till before sunset?
Right.
Leave. Wow. Don't stay because they know you're here. So I've been warned, but nothing dramatic, nothing, So we'll see how this IS Islam series goes. I've gotten more hate mail because of that than anything else I've done. But it's the truth and it has to be told.
Now, do you genuinely fear for your safety, or given that you are in the United States? And I must say, you are in Southern California. So while there is absolutely no hate in my heart towards you, there is envy for you being in Southern California. So congratulations on ending up in Southern California. The true promised land, not Jerusalem. The true promised land is Southern California, but it's not LA, it's Orange County. That's the true promised land.
You know what? I've been in both, and I've loved both. They're both awesome. Right now, I'm in Los Angeles, and I love the culture here. I love the weather. I love everything. It's really, and it reminds me back home.
It is very true. Okay, so now let's get down to some. So now we've gotten a very good sense of sort of your personal history, which I think was important to sort of clarify. Let's talk about specifics that the world is grappling with, and of course you have a unique perspective given your own personal history. So issue 1, do you subscribe to the idea of these different appellations of Islam? There's radical Islam, there is extremist Islam, there's moderate Islam, there's Islamism, there's jihadism, or as Erdogan, the Turkish prime president, said, I don't remember the exact quote, but that's an offensive idea. Islam is Islam, period, full stop. What's
Right.
your view on this issue?
My view is the same as Muhammad's view,
Right.
because I took my view from the source. Okay. According to Muhammad, his view was exactly that. Islam is Islam, jihad and all of it, good, bad, and the ugly, and they don't apologize for it. This whole notion of radical is you know what gets on my nerves, Gad? Do you remember when they were doing this whole thing? Oh, let's not call them the Islamic State. Let's call them Dabiq or Daesh. Let's call them Daesh, right? Well, you know, Daesh means, it's the acronym for Dawla al-Islamiyya fil Iraq wa Sham.
مظبوط.
So John Kerry and Hillary Clinton and all these guys are saying, oh, let's not acknowledge that they're the Islamic State, but they're saying, let's call them Daesh. Okay.
Yeah, because whatever word you use, that's really how you defeat them, right? You don't want to hurt their feelings and you want to respect them. So if you use the right word, that's how you show them who's boss, right?
Right. We just gave them Iraq and Syria, Mr. John Kerry. Thank you.
Right.
Instead of calling them the Islamic State. So it's like, it's political correctness like that me and you can see beyond, but the typical American cannot, because they don't know these things.
Yes.
They're not aware. I do not believe there's such a thing as radical Islam. I do not believe there's such a thing as jihadism or militant Islam. These are all things based upon the life of Muhammad. If I'm gonna, I don't want to be the example of Christianity, because quite frankly, that's the ultimate. Like, I don't want that responsibility. Jesus is, right. Muhammad is for Islam. So
right.
Why would I base my information on anyone outside of Muhammad? Muhammad established an Islamic state when he was alive on the earth. He installed Abu Bakr, which was the first crazy Abu Bakr, who went on a killing campaign when Muhammad died. These things are historic. They are there. They're not hidden. Yet in America in 2016, it's easy to hide them because of the political correctness.
Exactly.
So no, when I was growing up in Islam, when I was going to the mosque, we never heard about radical Islam. We never questioned jihad. Is it inner or outer, lesser or greater? It was jihad. There's no way around it.
It was offensive jihad. That's what you mean.
It was an expansionist ideology where we will take over the world. Look, I was hearing about the caliphate back in Jerusalem.
But you must have been going to the wrong mosque that's preaching non-true Islam. Had you gone to the other mosque in Jerusalem, it would have been the correct one, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I went to some free crazy guy.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is something that we're facing in Canada, and I think to some extent with the presidential election, with what Trump is saying, you're also facing it in the US, and of course the Europeans have been facing it for a while. And that is the idea. It's a very difficult topic, and that is, how do you get around the issue of being a free society that's welcoming, that's open, that allows people in who are genuinely kind, decent, peaceful people, when you know that many of these people who might be coming from the Middle East, never mind if they are terrorist sympathizers, but they might hold values that are antithetical to our Western secular liberal values. And that's what I often tell people. So in Canada, for example, we just let in right now, I think 25,000 Syrians pretty much in one shot, when it typically takes 12 to 18 months to just vet a single person. We let in 25,000, and I think we're on our fast track for another 25,000. Now, you don't need, out of the 25,000, many of them to be ISIS, terrorists,
sympathizers, or even terrorists. Yeah,
if 80% of them hold very nasty views about Jews or about women or about gays or about religious minorities or about atheists, then that itself is a problem. So in your view, clearly the idea that we shouldn't let anybody in, that's crazy. I mean, you can't completely shut the door to people who, I mean, you came, right? I mean, you were, I mean, there's millions, there's endless Muslims who are perfectly lovely. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we can't have the opposite, which is, the sort of German, Scandinavian model, let everybody in, and anything short of that is racist and bigoted. How do we hit the right note, the right tone, the right cadence? What's your view on that?
I think so I'll take it from being this big, huge idea called immigration to this apartment for me. Okay, if I'm going to open that door, I'm going to know who's coming in and who's leaving, because this is my home. This is where I live. This is my sanctuary. The same thing with immigration. I think the borders should be welcoming and should be, I mean, this is why America is America. It's why the world cherishes America.
That's why you and I are Western now, right?
That's why we are, I mean, listen, I don't believe America needs to be great. Again, I still think America is great. We have a lot of issues, but my goodness, we have a lot of good stuff going on. I mean, for the most part, we're not killing each other in the streets. We've moved beyond that. We are governed by laws and democracy, albeit broken and maybe not perfect. However, it's still send me to America. I'll gladly go. So I'm saying this to say we love America and we honor America, and America is not yours or mine. America is really for the honest seeker of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. If you can vet them and figure out who is coming to America to assimilate, not to make money to send it back to Jerusalem to build a nice 5-story building so that the people could say, wow, look at this greatness, you know? Figure out how to vet them and then welcome them in. However, to just leave the doors open in the name of compassion, I call that stupid.
Right. It's collective. It is collective suicide.
It is. It really is.
Somebody gave me flack for saying that, but I mean, in fact, your analogy about the house, I've actually satirized this exact position, right? I always say, oh, you know, it's racist for you to not give your bank account number, right? It's racist of you to not leave the door open for any stranger to come in, right? I mean, it's crazy to think that we can have privacy and control over our bank account, over our wallet, over our homes, but when it comes to our countries, anything short of having complete open door becomes something that is racist, that's xenophobic, that's Islamophobic. But the problem is that I don't think anybody has found that machine that you could put somebody through so that you could know what's in their hearts and minds, right? And the reality, some people have said, well, there are ways that you could give people sort of religious/cultural tests to predict their likelihood of assimilation. But I mean, boy, that's not very difficult to beat.
I could cheat that.
Well, exactly, right? I mean, if that's your benchmark to differentiate those who are going to assimilate versus not, boy, is it going to be easier to beat that one. I mean, right? So how do we do it? So it's easy to say we need to have better vetting processes, but effectively, pragmatically, how do we do that? Do you have an idea?
I know one thing that would advance our safety significantly. And this is kind of a vague idea. However, it's the truth. Get rid of the stupid political correctness so you can, measure situations for what they are.
Right.
Let's stop. Let's. I was offended that boy in Dallas.
Yes.
What's his name? The school Ahmed. I was so offended when I heard that this Arab guy in Texas went to jail because he was accused of building a bomb. Until I looked at the clock and it looked like a bomb.
Right. So you're basically saying that, and actually I've talked about this quite often, and I recently did a clip on political correctness, and I offered an analogy with the spider wasp. The spider wasp, for those of you who didn't see this clip, is a group of spider wasps that do the following. They identify a spider that usually is much, much bigger than them. They find a way to sting the spider, rendering it in a zombie state so that they could now take it back to its burrow. And then it's perfectly alive. It's totally alive, but it's in a zombie state. And then the wasp lays its eggs on the spider so that when its offsprings hatch, they could have this ready source of calories to eat while the spider is still alive. And I argue that political correctness is the sting of the wasp, because it disarms you, it removes your capacity to think rationally, to verbalize that rationality, so that we could slowly be led into the abyss of lunacy and darkness without uttering a word, right? Muhammad Atta said, be quiet, everything will be okay. Shh, right? Well, that's exactly what happens with political correctness. It shackles you from being able to fight against ideas that need to be scrutinized, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I believe, honestly, if you get rid of the political correctness, America will be safe again because that's the only fog that hinders us from seeing white and black, you
And,
know?
and in a sense, and if I can add to what you just said, I suppose that one of the reasons why Donald Trump, you and I can dislike many, many things about Donald Trump, but I think any rational and reasonable person who wants to try to explain why he is being so successful, it's precisely because, rightly or wrongly, people are viewing him as somebody who wants to break the shackles of political correctness.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and people are fed up of PC, and therefore they see in him sort of the savior, the, forgive the pun, the crusader against PC. And of course, that itself could be dangerous because some of the things that he says are rather harsh, but you force people to that position by not allowing them to express themselves throughout the whole process, right?
Yeah, honestly, I believe that the White House's stand on radical Islam is why Mr. Trump is doing so well. He's saying what everyone is thinking, and he figured out how to survive the criticism of the PC. Now, listen, Gad, I was in my home. This was in 2006, I believe, and I get a knock on the door. And it's three guys dressed in black, literally just like the movie. Their badges were this big, their FBI badges, and these guys were there to interrogate me because they had gotten a tip of a suspicious Arab.
This is in California.
No, this is in the South. I won't say the state.
Okay,
I don't want to embarrass people.
Okay.
Anyways, so they talked to me for 2.5 hours, and when they walked away, I thanked them for coming, and they apologized.
Right.
See, and that was the end of it.
Right.
I have nothing to hide.
You didn't contact CARE to help you with Islamophobia?
Oh, please, CARE.
Maybe describe who CARE is for those of our viewers who don't know who they are.
Okay, so how does the Muslim world get beyond the embarrassing aspects of Islam? Is what they do is they create, or they have certain organizations which their sole job is to create enough noise that would make Islam look good and make others who challenge Islam bad. It's really a smear tactic, a smear campaign for anyone who chooses to discredit the Sharia law or Islam in general. Anybody who has said anything of influence against Islam, CARE just fetches them like white on rice. But you know what? CARE they will be exposed. I don't think they'll be around much longer. I believe. Well,
from your lips to God's ear, as they say. All right.
I almost said the cosmos because I've heard you say.
Actually, I only said God out of respect of my guest who's a believer. Otherwise, I would have taken the more non-denominational approach. Exactly. Very good. So okay. So where do you? I mean, do you feel? And let's not. Although I respect your desire to sort of couch it in a Christian theological perspective, but for those of us who may not be Christian,
but wait, hold on. I don't couch it in a Christian theological perspective. Actually, that is why I don't mention Christianity in any of my videos. That's why I don't. It is not my goal to convert a Muslim. It is my goal to make the lazy Muslim world deal and reinterpret their scripture. That's my intention.
Fair enough. I guess I was referring to your earlier history. You're right. Thank you for the correction.
So, I quit the I quit the televangelist program. That was me at that time because that was the opportunity that I had. Again, I had this epiphany when I saw that people in America were actually making excuses for Islam, and America was starting to look a little bit like the Middle East. That's when I changed course.
Right. You should come to some of the areas in Montreal and see how it's like here.
Oh, I could imagine.
There's a ranking that came out. I don't remember the exact details, but it was something like a listing of the most radical mosques, I think, in the world. I mean, in the world, right? I mean, including Yemen and Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
That's crazy.
And one of them was in Montreal. And our current prime minister was more than happy to go and pay a visit at one of the most radical mosques in the world. But that's the world that we live in. So as we approach, as I always tell my guests, because they're all fantastic and so interesting, I could keep you here for hours. But as we come to sort of the end of our chat, let's try to end it on a positive note. Do you feel that, or do you think that we are heading on a good trajectory? Is there optimism, or is there going to be a lot of bloodshed before we turn the ship around? What's your feeling?
You know, the new thing here in the West is reforming Islam.
Right.
That's like a new fad that seems to be going. I support the Muslim reformers because, according to what I've seen, it's the lesser of the two giants. You know, I would support Muslims reinterpreting and reforming their religion if it's possible. Personally, doctrinally, theologically, I don't think it's possible.
I completely agree with what you just said.
Right, it's not.
I've taken to task, I don't know if you know who he is, Majid Nawaz, who's one of the more famous reformers. And I did so, I thought, in a very polite and restrained way, where I specifically said that, look, I wholly support, secular, liberal voices like Majid's, who is trying to do the right thing, who is trying to reform. Do I think that that's going to work? Absolutely not. Now, some people sort of wrote to me both privately and publicly and said, you're exactly right. Other people were very upset because, hey, why are you criticizing this guy who's trying to do the right thing? Well, my thinking was the old expression, of rearranging the decks on the Titanic, right, as it's sinking. We don't have time to sit and try to think up every harf in the Qur'an or in the Hadith, every letter, to see how we can, especially when we know that the starting point is every last word, every harf is the inerrant and final and invariant word of God, of Allah. So what is it that you're trying to reform? And how are you going to reform the endless problematic passages? So if you're saying yourself that you support reform, but you don't think it's going to happen, isn't that a dead end? So what's the point of supporting something that's going to fail?
Well, that's a good question. And in the logical, ideal utopia, that question has merit.
Okay.
In PC America, I could start the Church of Beyonce today, and in about 10 years, I'll probably have a couple great, thriving bodies of people who believe in Beyonce.
And you'll be tax exempt.
And I'll be tax exempt. And I mean, the blessings are huge.
Right.
So that's how. Now, would a Muslim go to Saudi Arabia or Jerusalem or Turkey or one of these very Islamic places and say, I'm a Muslim reformer? They would never do it.
Right.
Now, this leads us to the whole thing is if we took a whole survey, and I hate to do this to you again, but the whole bacon and juice thing.
Right.
That's something to consider. I think it could be possible if the key leaders of Islam decided to do away with all of the craziness. I support that.
How? How do you do it doctrinally?
You can't.
Okay.
There is no, someone wrote me recently, a Muslim girl wrote me and said, I don't know how to be a Muslim. I don't know how you can be a Muslim and not want to like Muhammad.
Right.
Basically, this is a Muslim girl wearing the hijab, writing me a letter saying, I'm a Muslim, I'm dealing with I can't even be a Muslim and hate Muhammad.
Right.
That's how he set it up. You cannot disobey Muhammad and Allah and start your own thing. It's just impossible. Now, you can create something, you can create your version of it because you're in America. You cannot go to the Middle East and do it. They'll eat your lunch. By the way, talking about Reformation, it actually already happened.
Right.
The Islamic Reformation already happened. It was about a guy by the name of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab.
Wahhabism.
Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab was the first person to say we need to go back to the way things were and go back to Ayyam Muhammad, or the days of Muhammad. And this man in 1750 created a contract with a guy named Muhammad ibn Saad. Who is that? The Saudi royal elite.
Right.
So the Saudis created an alliance with this guy who was preaching Islam Reformation, and guess who his most famous disciple was? Osama bin Laden.
Right.
So you want Reformation according to the doctrines? Hello, Osama bin Laden.
Right. Right. Well, here's and I don't know if this is possible, but in the same way that Muhammad, had a revelation that permitted for abrogation. For those of you who don't know, I've already discussed this. When you have a passage in the Quran, typically in the early Meccan period, that is contradicted by another passage in the later Medinan period. Be gentle and respect everybody's religion earlier. Kill those who change religions. Smite the kuffar, so on. Then the later passage abrogates, nullifies the earlier one. So in one swoop, in one revelation, you're able to do sort of a blanket statement of all of the contradicting statements. So the only way I see it is if someone is able to reinterpret something that allows you to do a blanket nullification of all the problematic passages. If you're going to sit and go over every single letter in the hadith and in the Quran and so on to try to say whether the meant the, but right, it's the Bill Clinton, I didn't have sex, but I meant a, but I meant the, then we're going to be rearranging the decks of the Titanic while the Titanic sinks very quickly. Right. So there needs to be this kind of universal key that allows for a blanket reinterpretation of everything. Does that sound reasonable? Could that work?
That's the only way it would happen. That's the only way. You know what? That if you're talking about Quran, Surah 2, verse 106, it's where Allah. So in theology or in spirituality, they call these circumstantial revelations. It's when a cult leader or a spiritual leader has one thought that he's built so much of his life on, and then decides, I made a mistake.
Right.
What happens? He creates a revelation circumstantially. Right. And guess what? Muhammad? Remember when you weren't supposed to kill everyone? That's over now. And you know what? You know what the Quran calls that? Sure. Allah, according to Quran chapter 2, verse 106, He says, the verses we give to you now, they're not contradictions, but they are better revelations.
Right.
So here's the difference between the Old Testament, New Testament, as me, and someone who is an ex-Muslim, for example. The ex-Muslim will say, well, you have it in your Old Testament, or you have it in Joshua, Caleb, Moses. All these guys were warriors. Abraham. Great, that's fine. But my problem is not that religion has to be pacifist. My problem is that your religion deteriorated over time. We know that if there is a God, he works within time and space. Moses received the commandments 1, 2, 3, 4. 40 days later, he comes down from the mountain. So God works within time. So I'm okay with there being jihadi type, Levitical codes. I'm not okay with Jesus saying those codes and say, I wouldn't be a Christian. I would not follow anyone who says kill with the knife or with the sword. It's just not holy. It's not spiritual. Now you can have a holy message being revealed over time. And that's what I think, that's why Islam is, for me, that's why I'm okay with the Old Testament issues and not with the Quran, because it was flip-flop. We went from tribal laws in the Old Testament to the law of love, period. End case. Full stop, nothing more.
Yeah, I mean, things become less venomous as you go from Old Testament to New Testament. Things become more problematic as you go from Meccan to Medina.
Right. And then we just create it's almost like textbook. You can see it so clearly. All of the life of Muhammad, you can see where this one guy. And by the way, if you notice Bill Warner's statistics, he talks about the revelations that were in Medina were significantly less than in Mecca. Why? Because it was easier to do kumbaya, love, lakum dinukum waliya din. You have your religion, I have mine.
Exactly.
No compulsion religion. Well, why were you getting revelations in Mecca, Muhammad? And then suddenly there's like a 30% decrease of your verses.
Well, isn't it true that I think it was Aisha who said,
Allah must love you.
Exactly. Oh, apostle of God, you seem to always get revelations that are consistent with whatever sort of earthly things you're facing, right? Exactly. So she was a sharp one, that Aisha, even though she was quite young when they married. But in any case, okay, so we could hopefully end on a positive note and say that, through the efforts of guys like you and many of the other people in the space, we're hopefully contributing to the dialogue. Again, none of us wish any harm, any disrespect, any ill will to individual people. What we're about is truly living what a free society is. You and I know what the Middle East is. We know what it is to be afraid. You were afraid to tell people that you are now a Christian Well, let me tell you, it wasn't a pretty thing to be Jewish in the Middle East, and especially when we left Lebanon during the Civil War. So we know what those areas can produce. And if anything, all we're trying to do is create environments here in the West where everybody, Jew, Christian, Muslim, green, purple, blue, tall, short, can live in peace without having those hatreds follow us here.
That's why you need the Sharia, God.
Right.
That's why you need the Sharia.
You mean you need the Sharia to stop people from exercising what we're trying to do? Is that
well, that's what the misinformed Muslim in America would say. Oh, the Sharia it ends all of that conflict and violence.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, I guess okay. If you want, let's talk a bit about that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
We often hear, for example, Imam Rauf, the so-called Ground Zero mosque guy, going on CNN and on all other Western shows, saying, "Oh, are you kidding me? Sharia law, it is perfectly consistent. I mean, it is, with a few minor differences, it is perfectly consistent with American jurisprudence, with the American Constitution, with American and Western laws." I mean, it literally is impossible to imagine a set of codes of law that are any more different than Western laws. And yet he's able to say that on CNN without getting a single challenge to a profoundly duplicitous statement. How do you explain this? Is it just people are ignorant? The CNN reporter can't challenge him because they don't know any better?
Right, absolutely. I think the CNN reporter is most likely ignorant. The Sheikh himself is not.
Of course.
You see, here's the thing. Do you know the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights? Have you ever given it? Okay, for me, it's a document that should be in the Bible. I should not say that publicly, but my friends, it's got such depth and substance to it. Eleanor Roosevelt, when she drafted that, she left no mark for any tyrant or dictator or anything. Okay, so Article 18 of the Declaration says this: everyone has the right. Now, this is interesting because all of the constitutions in the Middle East will say this, but I'll tie it up for you in a minute. It says everyone has the right to believe or disbelieve, to convert or to not convert, to practice publicly or privately, individually or corporately, in the matters of freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. See, in the Middle East, they will say, oh, we believe in the freedom of religion. You have the freedom to be a Christian or a Jew in your home. Just don't be a Christian or a Jew outside of your home. So the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights was so antithetical. Is that a word?
Yeah. Antithetical.
Trying to be like you, right? Antithetical.
Yeah.
To the Sharia law. Guess what the Muslim nations decided to do?
They
created
the Qahira, the Cairo.
They created the Cairo Declaration of Human Rights in Islam. And if you read those rights, it is so intertwined and contingent upon the Sharia law. It's alarming that so many nations were allowed to adopt that treaty or that declaration, and no one questioned it.
Right.
Well, what if I don't want human rights within the context of Islam and the Sharia?
Right. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just playing devil's advocate. What if I wanted to be a Kafir? What if I am so anti-Islam that I do not want to be anything? I just zero. I have no affinity for it. So you cannot make me do that. And for the United Nations to agree to that, it's really alarming. But knowledge is what's going to keep this from advancing. And people like you, people like me. And the good news is, so you want a good note? This is the good note, is that people are beginning to wake up.
Right.
And people are beginning to see that it's not all religions are created equal. Not all interpretations and not all context is interpretable.
Allah ya'tik al-afiyah.
Thank you, Habibi.
Tell us before we end, about your YouTube channel, where people can find it so that they can go and start watching your very enjoyable and entertaining videos. And hey, it helps that you're a good-looking guy that
Thank
wears
you.
those tight, muscular
Please.
shirt. When I saw that, I said, you know what? This guy is the right guy. You don't want an old guy like me saying
You're
these things.
hilarious.
You want a young guy with the muscles, the
You're
whole
so
thing.
funny. You're
So
hilarious.
tell us about the YouTube, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, but can I have your brain?
Thank you.
Your credentials at the end of your emails are
Thank
left.
you. You're very kind.
So
tell us about your YouTube channel.
the easiest way is to go to hazemfarraj.com, HAZEMFARRAJ, and there are links to the social media. Basically, if you Google Hazem Farraj, go to my channel. I started a series called Islamic State Islam, Good Muslims or Hijackers of a Religion. And so over a course of 13 weeks, short videos, 8 minutes or less, I compare ISIS to early Islamic Islam. And so the correlations are pretty staggering. And again, it's all based on the trilogy of the Sunnah, the Sunnah. So hazemfarraj.com or YouTube, Hazem Farraj.
And your what's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is @Hazem, HAZEM_F. There's only one Hazem Farraj, so it'll be easy to find.
Shukran habibi tشرفنا.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna stop the clip and then stay on the line. Thank you so much, Hazem.
You're very welcome.